Hey, welcome back PetaPixel viewers. It is Chris Niccolls here. I have a brand new Leica Q3 with the 43mm lens. Look at this, I mean, it's beautiful. Looks basically like the original Q3, but look at that gray leatherette on there. Gray, just like the rainy day that we're shooting on today. Okay, so other than this gray leatherette, this body is identical to the original Leica Q3, but I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of recap in case you're not quite familiar with that product. But what I really wanna focus on is this new 43mm lens. Now, luckily this body is weather sealed because look at this yucky weather, it's getting soaking wet. But we did have an opportunity to at least take this to sunny California, so it's not gonna be all doom and gloom. Okay, so quick little recap here on the Leica Q3 system. So this is a fixed lens, full frame body. The Leica Q3, one of the main upgrades was it got a 60 megapixel sensor. So this is what we've seen in the M11 model, the original Q3, very similar to the Sony a7R5. I do love the detail that we get out of it. And the Leica Q3 shoots with a base ISO of 50. We also have a gorgeous body design, I mean, beautifully machined, exactly the same as the original Leica Q3. And we do have a nice display set up here for composing and capturing your images. First off, we have a tilting screen. It articulates just on the one axis there, but nice for high angle or low to the ground shots. Not so much if you're gonna shoot vertically low or high. It's a 1.84 million dot LCD panel, touchscreen interface, and then a really nice 5.76 million dot EVF. Refreshes up to 120 frames per second. I mean, it's actually a really nice way to compose. Now, we also have the exact same setup for autofocus from the Leica Q3, and that's actually too bad. I wish that would improve a little bit. It is a phase detect autofocusing system, but it still tends to wobble when you're focusing continuously, and you lose a ton of sharpness when you're looking through the displays. So everything gets soft while you're trying to track moving subjects. And frankly, it's not that great at tracking moving subjects unless they're moving fairly slow. As a single autofocus camera where you're gonna lock on something, recompose and shoot, it does a good job. That is primarily how people use these. It's a very simple interface, but it has not improved from the last model. Now, on the bottom of this camera, we have, again, the exact same setup as the original Leica Q3. I mean, it's a nice battery system, and I like the way that they incorporate it, locking right in there, but we still have the same single SD card slot here, UHS 2 speed, but what I kind of feel that they should have done in the original Q3 and could have done here is add some built-in memory. This is something that Leica do on a lot of their other cameras. They've even upgraded the amount of memory, going from things like the M11 to the M11 monochrome, and this camera would really suit having built-in memory in case you don't want to rely on that card or you leave it at home or for whatever other reason. We just don't get it, and I feel that's an oversight. Okay, let's talk about burst rates here on the Leica Q3 43. It is exactly the same as the original Leica Q3, which is not great, but adequate for most street shooting that you're gonna do. So the Leica Q3 cameras shoot DNG files, which is really nice, 14-bit quality, and you'll get that 14-bit RAW file in burst shooting mode up to 4 frames per second, or FIPS, as I now say, with autofocus continuous. If you don't need autofocus, you can shoot 7 FIPS per second. And then if you don't need 14-bit RAW files, if you're willing to drop the bit rate and lose some dynamic range, you can push up to 9 frames per second with mechanical shutter, and up to 15 frames per second if you're willing to go to the electronic shutter. I do want to say though, the electronic shutter on this camera with this 60 megapixel sensor, not a very fast readout speed, so you will get some rolling shutter issues. Another thing that might have been missed opportunity here is there's no content authenticity support. I mean, this is something that Leica is incorporating to the other cameras, and again, an opportunity to do it here, but they haven't. And I could see actually a lot of people using a camera like this in a journalistic fashion, so unfortunately we don't have that. So everything that's great about the Leica Q3 is still present here, but there's a lot of annoying things, and all the things that are missing, those are all still missing here and still annoying here. And that's too bad, because like, these are not affordable cameras by anybody's metric. And on top of that, you might say, okay, well, maybe they're trying to keep things simple so that if you have an original Q3 and then you get this as well, it's exactly the same apples to apples. But I really think it's more just to simplify manufacturing for Leica, because they do struggle to get enough units out in production as it is. Okay, so I know we're burning through the Leica Q3 body specs pretty fast, but that's because it's a known commodity. What is new is this exciting new Leica 43mm f2 lens. Now, the original Leica Q3 sported a really nice f1.7 28mm lens, beautiful, sharp, very good, and it gave you that wide angle coverage for street photography with the ability to crop quite tightly in on that 60 megapixel sensor and still get very usable images at tighter fields of view. But now I have a gorgeous 43mm f2 apochromatic Summicron lens, and this is what I'm really excited to test. How does this change compared to the 28mm? First off, the things are the same, the build quality. I mean, this feels very familiar. So beautiful aperture ring, and I do have an automatic setting there for it. The manual focus is still smooth as ever. It's got a really nice feel to it. I can lock it into autofocus positioning. And when I click between macro shooting or regular shooting, it cleverly changes the distance scale to give me the appropriate distances. It's a very classy setup and it's very easy to use. Normal lenses generally don't give you good macro reproduction ratios, and unfortunately this is no exception. I mean, we're getting about 25.5 centimeters from the sensor to our subject, so I get a decent amount of working distance, but as you can see, our actual macro reproduction is nothing to write home about. So I could see myself personally using the 43mm lens uncropped very often because I do like shooting a normal focal range for just street photography when we're out and about. But much like the original Q3, we do have some crop modes here, trying to take advantage of that relatively high megapixel count that we have on the sensor. So with a very quick touch of the button, I can toggle through 60mm, 75mm, 90mm equivalent, 120, and then 150mm equivalent. And again, this is digital cropping. We're losing megapixels pretty fast. I don't think I'd personally use much over 75 or 90mm very often at all, but it is an option here if you want it and you're okay with lower resolution. Now, because we have a 43mm f2, we do have more potential to get shallow depth of field shots here than we did on that 28mm, maybe even a little bit more useful for things like portrait photography. So I did want to do a little test here on bokeh, have a first look at the specular highlights. Okay, so first let's take a look wide open at f2. You get that beautiful cat's eye effect. I really like that if I'm shooting portraits with specular highlights in the background, and very clean highlights overall, even stopping down the aperture. Things stay fairly round. You get a bit of a polygonal effect there with the aperture blades, but clean, no soap bubble effect, no onion rings. And so again, nice soft transitions from in focus to out of focus areas. As far as bokeh goes, this lens is doing a really good job. All right, next let's take a look at sharpness here. You know, shooting wide open at f2, I want a high-end lens like this to deliver good detail. And looking at our charts, that's exactly what I'm getting. f2 here in the center, plenty of detail, nice and sharp. Pretty much what I would want to get out of the 60 megapixel sensor. Stopping the lens down in the center at f4, you'll notice we're really not getting much improvement in detail at all. When we look at the corners at f2 here, it's actually still pretty good. There's a little bit of vignetting, a slight touch of softness shooting wide open, but stopping the lens down to f4, those get really sharp, the vignetting goes away. This is a fantastic optic to shoot wide open, and that's exactly what I want for the money that I'm paying. Now, because this is a wide aperture lens, I also want to test Bokeh, that longitudinal chromatic aberration. I'm sorry I'm not wearing the shirt right now. This is where you get color fringing in the foreground and background out of focus areas, and it's very difficult to remove in post. If you can see here, there's a little bit of Bokeh. It's not the usual green magenta split that we normally see. It's more of a cyan orange kind of split here. You'll notice it if you're shooting wide open with high contrast scenes, but it's actually pretty minor. I don't think it'd be too big a problem, but again, very hard to get rid of in post if you want to. Okay, so I think we're gonna call it a wrap for today, just because our weather's not very nice and it's not getting any nicer. There's still a lot of stuff I want to test on the lens, talk about video, you know, maybe do some lit portraiture. So when you see us again, we'll be back for more on the Q3 here. Okay, we're back. We've got a beautiful sunny day today. This is exactly what we need to test some more features here on the Leica Q3 43. So one of the unique features about this camera, it does have a mechanical leaf shutter lens. It goes up to a maximum of 2,000th of a second. Then you can go beyond that to 16,000th of a second if you want to use electronic shutter. Now, the beautiful thing about a leaf shutter lens is you can sync with flashes up to that 2,000th of a second. You're not limited like a focal plane shutter is up to 200th or 250th of a second usually. So this does give us a really nice advantage when we want to do flash out on a bright day like today. So that's why I brought out the Westcott FJ400 flash unit here. Very portable, battery power, it's awesome. Lots of power, even going through this Manurti's beauty dish. It's gonna light me up really nice and evenly and outcompete that sun. I'm not even close to maximum power. I'm only at 6.5 there, so I got lots of power in reserve. And if you wanna check out either the beauty dish or the FJ400, just click in the links in the description below or visit fjwestcott.com and get yours today. And that is again why Westcott is PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner. So I'm setting up exposure here for Jordan, and this is where the beauty of this system is. So first off, I can use the 2,000th of a second leaf shutter to really cut all of that extra light. I can also then go to f4, that's gonna cut some of that ambient light, but still gonna be very shallow depth of field. And then the base ISO being 50 here on the Leica Q3 body, it's naturally low. So that just gives me that little bit less exposure in the background, lights me up with the FJ400 here, so I look nice and bright. I stand out a little bit. I mean, it's fantastic for doing environmental portraits. And if I had a focal plane shutter camera with this, with a base ISO of 100, I would have to be using ND filters like crazy and then really crank up the power here and hopefully have enough to still do the trick we're doing today. So this is a really nice, unique case situation for the Leica Q3 43, especially now because this lens is just a little bit better suited to portraiture, like this head and shoulders kind of stuff, rather than the older 28mm lens. Okay, so we got this beautiful sunny day, which lets us test flare characteristics on this lens, something we weren't able to do, of course, the other day. It was yucky. So looking at this here, first off, we've got a really good hood. I mean, this hood's designed to protect the front of the lens from a lot of extraneous light outside of the composition, doing a good job there. But the coatings also are doing a really good job. We're not really losing much contrast, as you can see. We're not really getting any ghosting, and that's really quite strange. Like, even stopped down quite heavily, not seeing any ghosting in the far corner. So this lens is actually doing a really good job shooting towards bright light sources. I'll talk about video, and honestly it's easy because it's more of the same. Nothing has changed. It's the exact same as the older Q3. So first off, the thing that kind of lets it all down is the 60 megapixel sensor. It's just a lot of megapixels. It's not ideal for video recording. So for example, although this camera can shoot 4K and 8K recording, it does it with a substantial crop. 1080 is the only situation where you're gonna get the full width of the sensor. Another issue with that 60 megapixel sensor, you get a lot of rolling shutter because it doesn't read out very fast. So even though the Leica Q3s have image stabilization, and this does have it in its 43mm lens, it still gets a lot of rolling shutter issues. Hey look, regardless, you can get nice looking video quality out of the Leica Q3 43, absolutely. But you know, although you have things like L-Log, which is nice, you get good dynamic range, it's only available in .mov, ProRes recording, you can only do that in 1080p. I mean, there's just weird quirks about this camera that keep it from being a really solid video shooter, especially though the fact that we're missing a headphone jack and a mic jack. So no monitoring audio, no using better microphones. That really relegates the Leica Q3 43 to really a photographer's tool where you might want to take the occasional video clip, but anything serious, this is just not the right camera for it. Well, I had a really nice time with the Leica Q3 43. I hope you guys enjoyed your time here with us as well. And I gotta say, I actually do prefer this 43mm focal length to the 28, and I love 28s. I get the versatility of having that wide angle, being able to crop in tighter, but I just find this a little bit more useful for walking around, photography, some of the portraiture that we did. It's nice that you can crop it now to like 50mm or 75mm and not lose as much as you would on the 28. I do still wish that I could go even further, and so maybe that's I don't know, like a Q3 75 or 90 on the horizon. But regardless, this is a pretty good move for Leica because not many people approach that 43mm focal length in a fixed focal length camera. 28 for sure, 35 for sure. Ricoh has touched that 43mm range, pretty close to it. And so I like that we have another alternative on the market now. Now with that all being said, I still feel like there's a bit of a missed opportunity here to update the camera model. I get that if you're coming from a Q3 28mm, you know, getting the 43, you want it to, I guess, be as familiar as possible, but I don't think many people are going to get both of these cameras, you know, and if I'm deciding between one or the other, as much as the Q3 is loved, it still has some deficiencies. I'd like to see the autofocus get better. I'd like to see some built-in memory here, some of the C2PA authentication. I mean, these are nice things that are available and have not been put into this camera, and it makes me think if they do make another model, like a 75 or 90mm model, which I'm hoping for, it'll probably still be the same Q3 body. Anyways, time will tell. Let us know your comments below. Let us know what you think about this new camera version. Any other questions you might have, we'd love to answer. And in fact, we answer those on the PetaPixel podcast. So check that out. It's on the exact same channel, or you can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. Just search for PetaPixel Podcast. Otherwise, do check out our merch store. We'd appreciate the support there. Just store.petapixel.com. And hopefully we'll see you guys soon with more on PetaPixel shortly.